Okay, so today we're going to unpack a pretty incredible story. It's about a huge environmental transformation, one that honestly looks like an absolute miracle on the surface. But the real story, as we're about to see, is actually buried deep, deep underground. For decades, China's Loess Plateau was basically the poster child for ecological disaster. I mean, just picture it, a totally barren, eroded landscape. But then came one of the most ambitious restoration projects in history, and the results were, frankly, stunning. It's been celebrated all over the world as this massive success story. But what if all that success was just built on borrowed time? What if turning the plateau green was actually creating a much deeper, completely invisible problem? And that is the central question we're tackling in this explainer. All right, so first, let's just take a look at the miracle itself, right? Back in 1999, this project called Green for Green kicked off. The whole idea was to take these dusty, barren croplands and hillsides and turn them back into forests and grasslands on a massive, massive scale. And the results? They were staggering. I mean, in just 2 decades, the vegetation cover literally doubled. We're talking about an area of tens of thousands of square kilometers that was completely transformed. It cut down on soil erosion, it captured carbon. I mean, by every single metric you could see with your own eyes, this was a total, unqualified triumph. But here's the twist. Because, of course, there's a twist. Beneath all that beautiful green, a hidden drought was starting to take hold. Scientists began to notice something, well, something strange, a paradox. How could a landscape get greener on the surface, but way, way drier deep below? In fact, it turns out this new, lush vegetation was actually becoming super fragile. During dry spells, these new forests, they were really struggling. Some were even dying back. So that raises this fundamental question, right? How can a place be thriving and thirsty at the exact same time? The answer, as it turns out, is all about where the water is, or more importantly, where it isn't. Okay, to really get this, we need to talk about something called the vadose zone. Just think of it like a gigantic sponge made of soil and rock sitting between the surface and the deep groundwater table. And on the Loess Plateau, this sponge is incredibly deep. We're talking 50 to 315 meters deep. It holds water that fell as rain decades, maybe even centuries ago. You could say this is our scene of the crime. So what happened next is pretty cool. Scientists basically became detectives. They started following 4 key lines of evidence to figure out what in the world was happening deep inside this giant soil sponge. Let's walk through the clues they uncovered, one by one.
So where did the investigation begin? Well, it started with a really unusual tool, basically a ghost of the atomic age that lets scientists date water with some pretty surprising precision.
Okay, so clue number 1 comes from an isotope called tritium. Here's the deal. Back in 1963, all those atmospheric nuclear tests created what's called a bomb peak of tritium in rainfall all over the world. Fast forward to today, and scientists are finding that exact same 1960s tritium timestamp way down in the soil, like 7 to 14 meters deep. This proves 2 huge things. First, water moves incredibly slowly through this soil. And second, the water that's deep underground isn't from last year's rain, it's from over 60 years ago. That leads us right to clue number 2. It's all in the roots. See, the native plants that have been there forever, they have shallow roots. They're just sipping on recent rain that soaks into the top couple of meters. But the new trees they brought in, the ones planted for this rapid greening, well, they have these incredibly deep roots. We're talking 5, 10, even 15 meters down. They're not just drinking today's water, they're actively mining that ancient rainwater from the 1960s. And that brings us to clue number 3, the life cycle of these new plantations. For the first, say, 15 years, they just grow like crazy. Why? Because they're fueled by that deep water bank of old moisture. But after about 2 decades, they've used it all up. They actually create something called a dried soil layer, a permanent, bone-dry section of soil deep underground that acts like a barrier, blocking any new rainwater from ever reaching those depths again.
And here's our final clue, clue number 4. It's all about competition. In a good wet year, different plants are kind of polite. They drink from different depths, they stay out of each other's way. But in a dry year, oh, everyone gets desperate. All the plants, no matter what kind, they all send their roots deep to compete for the exact same dwindling supply of old water. Their little ecological separation, their niche, it just collapses, putting intense stress on the entire system.
So let's put all of these clues together. What the scientists really uncovered wasn't a story of sustainable greening at all. It was a story about racking up a huge invisible debt. A debt being paid for with a finite, basically non-renewable resource.
This quote here just nails it. Greening without water balance is not resilience, but debt. That beautiful green surface was basically hiding a bankrupt water budget down below. It looked like resilience from the air, but on the ground, or under it, it was just building up this massive water debt.
And this brings us to the core concept, hydrological debt. It's pretty simple, really. The ecosystem was spending water way, way faster than it was earning it from rainfall. It was thriving, sure, but it was doing it by draining a savings account of ancient water that, once it's gone, well, it can't be easily refilled by today's climate.
But hey, the story doesn't have to end there. Understanding the problem is always the first step towards solving it, right? And the good news is, scientists have now identified some really clear pathways to rebalance this whole equation and maybe build a truly sustainable green landscape for the future.
So how do you actually fix this? Well, it's not about just undoing all that greening. It's about making it smarter. The key is a whole set of sustainable strategies. Things like thinning out the forests so they don't demand so much water, rotating those really thirsty trees out after about 20 years to let the soil recover, actively harvesting water rain to help it soak deeper into the ground, and, maybe most importantly, matching the right plants to the right place. You know, forests where it's wetter and grasslands where it's drier. It's common sense, really.
Ultimately, what happened on the Loess Plateau is a really powerful lesson for the entire world. It forces us to ask a super critical question for any big environmental project. Are we creating true, lasting resilience? Or are we just making today look good by borrowing from tomorrow? As we've seen, sometimes the answer is buried deep beneath the surface.